Welcome back, everybody. It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. This will be going over 5 running backs that are going really late in drafts that I think really qualify as some late round sleepers that I'm certainly targeting in a lot of my drafts. It's a really huge advantage to your fantasy roster if you can find a guy that's drafted late in drafts, especially at the running back position, that turns into a real and reliable fantasy starter for you guys, especially at the running back position where it's super hard to have any sort of depth at all at the position. You guys all know if you've played fantasy for any sort of time, come week 8, week 9, you're really hurting to find that RB2. Even finding someone that's a reliable weekly starter late in drafts is a huge boost to your team. And if you can find like a Buck Irving like you found last season, a guy that's going really late that ends up being a fantasy superstar, it's like stealing. You're basically getting a second round pick late in drafts, getting an additional one for your roster. So this is going to be a video. We go over 5 guys. I can hopefully find someone like that for you. We'll also go over the running or the receiver, quarterback, and tight end positions as well. So we'll just keep sort of going through these. Just finished up some league winner videos as well. So if you haven't watched those, I highly recommend you take a look at those. And yeah, this should be a fun one. If you have any comments, players I left out that you want opinions on, just let me know in the comments. I love interacting with you guys there. It's a lot of fun, and we're really starting to track towards football here soon. It's late June, so once July starts, things really do pick up fast. So it's going to be a lot of fun here, guys. Let's get started. So kind of a personal favorite of mine so far this offseason has been Taj Spears. And I think the big thing is just I personally believe that Taj Spears is a really talented player. You don't have to look far. Just look at that picture of him scoring a touchdown over the Bengals last year. He's a talented player. I think we've seen him put up some monster numbers before. We've seen him with some really highlight reel plays just 2 years ago as a rookie when Derrick Henry really prevented him from being on the field a whole lot. And then last year, still in a timeshare with Tony Pollard. Pollard clearly operating as the lead back in this backfield, but Pollard's only getting older. We saw him deal with injuries quite a bit last year and sort of wear down just a little bit. I think it makes a lot of sense for the Titans to make a change just a little bit towards using Spears a little bit more this season if they can. On top of that, Cam Ward should elevate the ceiling for the entire offense. This was an offense led by Mason Rudolph and Will Levis last year. That's not going to be a good recipe for success. There's not a whole lot of fantasy production to go around in an entire offense like that. And I think there's a lot of reason for optimism in this offense. And Spears is one of the more talented players in this offense. This is actually a talented backfield on a team that does need playmakers. So I like Spears a lot. I know it's been a really small sample size, but last year he was the RB9 during the fantasy playoffs, so we saw him really sort of start kind of breaking out at the end of last season. Tony Pollard was active for 2 of those 3 games as well. He was limited with an ankle injury, so I'm not saying that this was just him taking over from Tony Pollard. I do believe that Tony Pollard is the starter and should be going forward, but there's a pretty significant ADP discrepancy between the two. Pollard is the RB28 off boards right now. Spears is the RB42. I think that discrepancy is too large. I think it should be a little bit closer than that, and I think that, as Taj Spears, he's shown a lot in his time so far in the NFL. He's going into his 3rd year, so he's by no means old. He should have plenty of tread left on his tires. He should be an ascending player. And honestly, if Tony Pollard misses time with the pass catching ability that Spears has, with the explosiveness we've seen him with the ball in open space, he's a top 20 play at the position every single week that Tony Pollard is out. And I think he's got flex value, especially in PPR formats, even in weeks where Pollard plays. Going with the RB42 off the board right now, I think he finishes significantly above that this season. And if there's a scenario where Tony Pollard goes down, Taj Spears would be a potential league winner, honestly. So he's a guy that I think you can start in a pinch if you need to, and there's a lot of upside if things break right for him from a Pollard injury standpoint, or if he does just overtake him. I think that's somewhat possible, although I think Pollard played really well last season as well. So I'm not going to predict that, but I think it's something that could certainly happen if things go exactly the way they need to for Spears this season. Next up, we got kind of another handcuff here in Ray Davis. He just really impressed me last season. He actually made my sleeper list, like a deep league sleeper list, last year around this time. So he's a guy I was keeping my eye on, but I really didn't see him performing nearly as well as he did last year. I know it didn't turn into a whole lot of fantasy production, but I sort of thought that if Ray Davis were going to carve out a role in this offense, it would pretty much just be as the goal line back. And James Cook really did he tied for the league in rushing touchdowns last season, so clearly that didn't happen. Ray Davis didn't just go out there and dominate the goal line work, but he just looked really good every time he touched the ball. He had up over 150 rushing yards in his lone start last season, and honestly, every time he touched the ball, he looked great. He could catch the ball out of the backfield. It's not a specialty. They're going to use Ty Johnson there. James Cook's a really capable pass catcher as well, but the Bills are clearly more than okay using a committee backfield approach. That's probably part of why they haven't paid James Cook yet. If you guys aren't following this offseason very closely, James Cook still hasn't gotten the contract extension he's looking for. He's going into the final year of his deal. James Cook did show up for mandatory minicamp, so he's doing all the right things, trying to be with the team and everything, but Still possibly holds out, could certainly hold in, which is something we've seen a lot more commonly lately where players show up to practice but just don't actually do any practicing. We saw that with Brandon Ayuk last season, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb. It's common these days, and we saw it with Josh Jacobs 2 years ago. When Josh Jacobs did that, he was by no means near the quality of running back that year that he was even last year. We saw him really put up a horrendous season with the Raiders before going to the Packers and having another really solid year. So missing that practice is incredibly valuable for running backs especially, and I think there's a world where if James Cook misses practice time, Ray Davis could certainly carve out just a larger role in this offense. And the Bills, they didn't really miss a beat without James Cook. I don't think James Cook's a bad player by any means. James Cook's a fantastic running back. He's going to get paid by someone if it's not Buffalo, and I do think he will get paid by Buffalo, but I think Ray Davis is a guy that's going to have a role in one of the best offenses in the NFL. I think we could still see him get used at the goal line level a little bit more than he did last season. And if something were to happen to James Cook, whether it be injury, whether it be him holding out, whether it be him just losing some snaps to Ray Davis because he misses a lot of practices this offseason, there's an opportunity here for Ray Davis to come out here and be a really valuable fantasy asset. And he's going as the RB 47 off board, so he's basically free. He's a premier handcuff for me, and he's a guy that I think you can play in a bench if you need to, because there's definitely a touchdown upside with his role in what should be another really good offensive year for this team. Now, this one might be my favorite, actually, of the five guys I'm going to talk about here. Jaden Blue is someone that I'm super excited about. Of all the guys here, he's not a guy that's actually a handcuff. I think Jaden Blue's got a very clear shot to be the starting running back in Dallas, and I do firmly believe that already he's the best running back in Dallas. I don't think that's even necessarily a hot take, because he doesn't even need to be good for that to be true. He's trying to beat out Javonte Williams, who was running to Denver, horrendous last season, looked horrible for the last 2 years coming off the injury. Miles Sanders just couldn't start for Carolina despite them giving him a huge contract, has never really shown that he's a super talented player, and just looks like he's on his way to being out of the league. So the competition here is incredibly weak. Jaden Blue is an extremely explosive player, and the main argument that you hear from people about Jaden Blue is that he's just not big enough to be a starting running back. They don't think he can hold up to the touch workload that you typically see, but that was a really similar argument that you heard last season with Bucky Irving in Tampa Bay. It was that Rashad White's the bigger back. They're never going to give Bucky Irving that kind of workload just because he can't hold up to it. And just for comparison, Jaden Blue is 5'9", 196 at the combine. Bucky Irving weighed in at 5'10", 194. So he's actually a little bit bigger than Bucky Irving. Again, I'm not saying he's Bucky Irving. Bucky Irving's a phenomenal player. I guess the argument here is that the size isn't necessarily a death sentence by any means. If you're the more talented player, you should see the field, and I think he's going to. I think Jaden Blue is a really talented player. He's clearly far and away the best catching back in this backfield. He's a guy that clearly is going to operate as the third down back in an offense that's going to throw the ball a ton, and I think beyond that, he's just being far underdrafted. Like right now, he's currently being drafted as the RB, I'm looking at it right now. He's currently being drafted as the RB 43 off board, so that's just far too low. He's a guy that I truly believe is a starting running back for a really good offense in the NFL. I get it. You can take Javonte Williams if you want to. Javonte Williams is currently being drafted as the RB 39. Miles Sanders currently being drafted as the RB 62. So there's a clear pecking order here, but I do personally believe that Jaden Blue should be drafted ahead of both of those guys. We saw this happen last season too with Dallas, even in particular. We saw scenario where you had Ezekiel Elliott kind of get drafted ahead of Rico Dowdle just because he was the name value, sort of like Javonte Williams here. And by the end of the year, it was just really clear that Rico Dowdle was the better player, and he ended up getting more workload. And I think Jaden Blue is a more explosive, better player than Rico Dowdle. This offense should be better this season with Dak Prescott hopefully staying healthy. And we saw Rico Dowdle finish last season as an RB2. So there's a lot of upside here in Dallas if Jaden Blue can just really get a stranglehold in that starting role. And I think there's a clear path towards that happening. So I like Jaden Blue a lot. I snagged him in my Dynasty League right after the draft because he went undrafted. Just 3-round draft pick, 3 rounds there. He was the first guy I went out and targeted. So he's a guy that I'm super excited about, a guy that I do want on a lot of my rosters, and he's certainly somebody that I think is going to at some point be an incredibly popular waiver wire ad if he doesn't get added early on the season here. Next up, we got another guy who maybe doesn't need an injury to happen for him to also end up just being the most talented running back on his roster. And that's Bashaudt Tutin. Pretty fun name there, but I think he's also probably got the most upside of any running back in Jacksonville this season. I think in general, though, the most likely scenario is that we see Travis Etienne sort of dominate passing down work, and then we're just going to see Tutin, Bigsby, and Etienne sort of mix in across the board everywhere else, and it's just going to be a mixed bag, and none of them are going to be super fantasy relevant. I do unfortunately think that's probably the most likely scenario, but that we're drafting these guys late enough that there's enough upside for us to target guys that have a lot of upside. And I think one of the best things to do in fantasy, it's one of the things that I try and remember every single year, and one of the things that I'm going to try and advise every single year as well, is to look for offenses that are talented and have really good players, but have really ambiguous backfields. There's generally a ton of value to be had in those backfields because really good offenses are going to provide us with a lot of fantasy production out of the running back position. And if we don't know where that's going to come from, that means that you're going to have a running back that's drafted really late in drafts that ends up being a really valuable asset. I look at us last season. Before the year, we identified on this channel, we identified Cincinnati, the Chargers, and Dallas as three offenses that were really high-end offenses but didn't really have a clear backfield plan. Out of those three offenses, you had Chase Brown finishes an RB1, J.K. Dobbins finishes an RB2, Rico Dowdle finishes an RB2, all of those guys being drafted super late in drafts. So the best thing I can do here is I'm going to say in general we should be targeting Jacksonville running backs because they're all being drafted late enough that the downside for them sucking is pretty much nothing. You can cut them and it's not a huge deal, but if one of them emerges as the true starter, they're going to be a huge asset. And I think that one of the three in Jacksonville that could emerge is like the full-time, I'm a workhorse running back. That's going to be Bashaudt Tutin because Etienne just wasn't good enough between the tackles to really justify getting that early down role, and Tank Bigsby not good enough as a pass catcher. So Tutin's the one of those guys that can actually do it all. He's a guy that I think has the most upside there. And beyond that, we could certainly see a situation where Travis Etienne gets traded. It's the last year of his deal. There have been rumors floating around that he could potentially be moved. And if that happened, there would be a very clear role here for Tutin to potentially just emerge right away as the starting running back. And if he can grab a hold of the lead role in this offense, like we've seen Travis Etienne just 2 years ago finish as a top 5 running back in this offense. This is an offense that just added Travis Hunter. You got Trevor Lawrence coming back to full health. Brian Thomas emerging as a year 2 breakout here. Like, this is an offense that should be really good. And if Bashaudt Tutin or any of these three running backs in general gets a stranglehold on that lead running back role, they're going to be a fantasy superstar. And Tutin's a guy that I think has the clearest path of all of them to actually being the workhorse running back in this offense. So he's someone that I definitely want to highlight. Currently being drafted is the RB41 off boards. He's being drafted behind Javonte Williams, behind J.K. Dobbins, behind Ramondre Stevenson, behind Zach Charbonnet. Like, this is a guy that's got a clear path towards being potentially elite for fantasy, and he's being drafted this late. So I know that the floor is near zero here, but I'm definitely targeting Bashaudt Tutin this season. And we've got one more deep dive here. I'm going to bring up Bashard Smith because I actually really like him. Props to you if you've heard of him. I know this is going to be the first time a lot of you guys have heard of Bashard Smith, but he was taken in the 7th round this season by the Kansas City Chiefs, and he's going to immediately step in as the best pass catcher in the backfield. This is a team that has Isaiah Pacheco, Kareem Hunt, and Elijah Mitchell. I was blanking on his first name. And Elijah Mitchell is their 3 other running backs in this backfield. None of those guys profile as elite pass catchers. I know Kareem Hunt's been great at it in his career, but he does not have anywhere near the level of explosiveness that Bashard Smith has. And Bashard Smith was an elite kick returner in college. It makes him a really safe bet to make the roster this year because at worst, I think they're going to want him returning kicks instead of using guys like Xavier Worthy for that. So Bashard Smith's going to make the roster, and we've seen Kansas City be a team that's shown a strong willingness to feature late round running backs. Several years ago, Kareem Hunt, I believe, was a 4th round draft pick. We saw him put up an RB1 finish. Isaiah Pacheco, 7th round draft pick himself, ended up being a feature back in the offense for some time. So this is a team that's clearly willing to play the best player, and this backfield really is wide open. We still expect the Chiefs to be a good offense, if not great. It's tough to know really what we're going to get out of the Chiefs. A lot of it depends on if their defense regresses because they just haven't needed to put up the number of points that they did earlier on in Mahomes' career. But these are the entire backfield outside of Isaiah Pacheco. They're all being drafted basically with like the last pick in your draft. So I think there's a lot of value to be had in just taking dart throws at those guys because, again, I think this Chiefs backfield is another one. It's one of those ambiguous backfields on a good offense. So somebody from this backfield is going to return fantasy value. It could be Kareem Hunt. It could be Isaiah Pacheco. It could be Mitchell. It could be Bashard Smith. And Smith is the cheapest of these guys. He clearly profiles as like, honestly, his role might be the safest of these guys. Maybe that's a bit of a stretch, but I feel pretty confident he's going to end up being the pass-catching running back in this offense. And we've seen just that role yield a lot of fantasy success before. Just look a few years back, we had Jerick McKinnon put up some really strong stretches of fantasy, like gold mines. Really, he had like several week-winning performances in the fantasy playoffs several years ago. McKinnon's been a really valuable asset in fantasy before, and that was near the tail end of his career. Bashard Smith should be a much more explosive player now than what McKinnon was at that point in his career. So I think there's a lot of upside here. He's an explosive player. Again, I think he's a guy that maybe it'll take a little bit to get more integrated into the offense. I don't think he's a guy that you're going to draft in week one you want to start, but I think there's at least a clear path towards him being utilized. And again, this backfield is wide open. It's going to be a good offense. I like Bashard Smith, the player, and he's someone that I think has a lot of upside. So just keep an eye on him. Don't forget about him. He's not a name that I think should be unknown, because I think there's a chance he ends up being a really popular waiver ad at some point this season. So that'll do it for the 5 running back sleepers I wanted to highlight here. Of course, there are going to be several other sleepers we can talk about going forward, so I'm going to go over the quarterback, receiver, and tight end positions next. No particular order there. I'll probably start with receivers next. If there are any running backs I didn't mention that you think I should have, let me know in the comments below. I'm happy to give you guys my opinions on those guys. It's a lot of fun talking about these deep dives here. Honestly, these are some of the most fun videos for me to make, because I get to talk about players that aren't super common, so it's fun to sort of do a deep dive on these guys. So I'm really excited about these players. If you have any questions, anything like that, let me know in the comments below as well. And then, yeah, it's just going to be a lot of fun. We got a lot more content coming out. If you haven't subscribed already, I highly recommend you do. There are going to be at least 3 videos a week for the entire rest of the offseason. There will be even more than that going into the regular season and beyond. So if you stick around with me, we're going to win some championships together, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So I appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you with the next one. Peace.
Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.